All right, so get ready because today we're going to be diving deep into a topic that might make you shift in your seat a little bit.
Yeah.
We're talking about the nature of cruelty.
Mm.
Now, we're not talking about like everyday disagreements or anything.
Right.
We're talking about like those truly shocking acts that kind of just leave us shaken and questioning humanity a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And for this unsettling but really important journey, I think,
Yeah.
our guide is going to be Simon Baron-Cohen's book, The Science of Evil.
Oh, absolutely. Such a fascinating book.
Have you read this one?
Yeah, I have. I've read it a couple of times, actually.
Yeah.
And, the title is definitely really attention-grabbing.
Oh, yeah.
But what I found interesting was that Baron Cohen actually kind of pushes us past this idea of evil as like a supernatural force or something.
Right.
He actually says that a much more insightful way to look at cruelty is through empathy, or more precisely, the lack of it.
So instead of asking, like, why are people evil,
Yeah.
the question should really be what's going on with their empathy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Baron Cohen suggests that, like, we all exist on this spectrum of empathy.
Okay.
It's sort of like this bell curve,
Yeah.
ranging from high empathy to low empathy.
Okay.
And most of us, we kind of cluster somewhere in the middle.
Right.
But then you have these individuals who are, like, way at the low end of the spectrum.
Okay.
And these are the people who operate with, like, 0 degrees of empathy.
And this isn't just some theoretical idea, right?
No, not at all.
He gives some truly terrifying real-life examples. Like, he
Yeah.
talks about Joseph Fritzl,
Oh, yeah.
the Austrian man who imprisoned his daughter in the cellar for 24 years.
It's just horrific.
It's a case that, like, shocked the world, really.
Yeah.
But what's even more disturbing is that it's not an isolated thing.
Right. It's like a chilling reminder that even in a family, supposedly a safe haven,
Right.
that potential for cruelty still exists.
Yeah.
And what's striking about that Fritzl case is that it wasn't just like a sudden burst of violence,
Right.
It was the slow erosion of empathy.
Yeah, over years.
Yeah, over years that allowed him to kind of justify what he was doing and to dehumanize his own daughter.
It's almost impossible to even imagine
Yeah.
that level of detachment.
Yeah.
And it's not just individuals, right?
No, absolutely not.
He also highlights the Armenian genocide,
Right.
where like over 1.5 million Armenians were systematically murdered
Yeah.
under Ottoman rule.
Mm.
And this wasn't just a few bad apples, right? This
Right.
was a whole societal shift.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these large-scale atrocities often start with these, like, subtle shifts in language and perception.
Oh, interesting.
The group that's targeted is dehumanized.
Right.
They're labeled as a threat.
Yeah.
And slowly their basic human rights are taken away.
It's like watching how empathy can be eroded on like a societal level.
Exactly.
And this isn't just in the past. Like
Yeah.
the book brings up the story of Esther, a young Kenyan woman who saw a man cut off another woman's finger in a supermarket
Oh, God.
just to steal her wedding ring.
It's hard to believe.
It's a stark reminder that these acts of cruelty are happening all around us.
Yeah.
Even in like normal everyday places.
Esther's story shows how, for some people, empathy can become so narrow,
Yeah.
that it only focuses on their immediate needs.
Right.
And they completely disregard the suffering of others.
Yeah.
It's like their empathy laser focuses on just one goal,
Right.
and they block out every other human consideration.
Yeah. It's all pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
It makes me think about like my own capacity for empathy.
Yeah,
Where do I fall on this spectrum?
right.
And is it even possible to change where we are on that scale?
The good question, and one we should all be asking ourselves.
Yeah.
And the good news is that empathy isn't fixed.
Okay.
While some people might be predisposed to lower empathy because of genetics or their early childhood experiences, our brains are adaptable.
So you're saying we're not just stuck with whatever level of empathy we're born with?
Not at all. There are things we can do to nurture and grow our empathy muscles. Yeah. But before we get into that, I think it's important to understand what actually happens in the brain when we experience empathy.
Okay.
Baron-Cohen refers to this as the empathy circuit,
Okay.
this network of brain regions that work together to help us understand and respond to other people's emotions.
Okay, so when I hear brain regions, my eyes start to glaze over a little.
Yeah.
Can you, like, break this down for me?
Yeah, sure.
What parts of the brain are we talking about?
Well, one of the key players is the amygdala,
Okay.
which is often called the brain's emotional center.
Okay.
And it's really important for processing fear, which is a crucial part of empathy.
Okay.
Imagine seeing someone's face and they're terrified. Your amygdala helps you recognize that fear and then react accordingly.
So if someone's amygdala isn't working properly, they might have trouble reading those emotional cues.
Exactly. And Baron-Cohen talks about this really interesting case of SM.
Okay.
It's a woman who couldn't recognize fear in other people because her amygdala was damaged.
Wow.
So this suggests that without a properly working amygdala, it's really hard for us to empathize with fear.
That's wild. Okay, so what other parts of the brain are in this empathy circuit?
Another important one is the prefrontal cortex,
Okay.
which is located right behind your forehead.
Okay.
And it's involved in a bunch of complex functions like understanding other people's perspectives, regulating our own emotions, and making social judgments.
You know, I remember reading about Phineas Gage, the railroad worker, who had that metal rod go through his prefrontal cortex.
Oh, yeah.
And it like totally changed his personality.
That's right. Gage's case, even though it was tragic,
Yeah.
it really helped us understand how the prefrontal cortex plays a role in social behavior and emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Damage to that area can make people impulsive and have a hard time understanding social cues, and they can't empathize with others.
It's like the prefrontal cortex is the brakes before we say or do something hurtful.
Exactly.
It helps us think about the consequences of our actions and how they might affect other people.
Precisely. And then there's the mirror neuron system,
Wow.
which is this network of neurons that fire both when we do an action and when we see someone else doing that same action.
So our brains are like mirroring what's happening in other people's brains.
In a way, yes. This mirroring might be the neural basis for our ability to understand other people's intentions and emotions. It's like by watching someone experience joy or sadness, our brains simulate those feelings.
Yeah.
And that lets us connect with them on a deeper level.
It's crazy to think that our capacity for empathy is literally wired into our brains.
Yeah.
But what happens when these circuits aren't working, right? Is that where we see those 0 degrees of empathy individuals?
That's a great question. And it's one we'll dig into more when we talk about the 3 distinct types of zero-negative individuals that Baron-Cohen identified.
Oh, I'm definitely interested. Let's take a closer look at these 3 types and how their empathy circuits might be playing a role in their behavior.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Yeah.
So we've kind of established this idea of an empathy circuit in the brain.
And how it can, like, malfunction
Yeah.
in some people, leading to, like, those chilling examples of cruelty we talked about.
Exactly.
But Baron-Cohen goes a step further and actually breaks down these, like, 0 degrees of empathy individuals into 3 different types:
Yeah.
borderline psychopath and narcissist.
Right.
And these aren't just casual labels, right?
No.
These represent like very specific patterns of behavior and brain function.
It's important to remember we're talking about like actual diagnoses here,
Yeah.
not just like personality quirks.
Right.
And each type has its own challenges and needs to be understood differently.
Okay, so let's break down these types one by one, starting with borderline.
Okay.
Baron-Cohen uses this case study of Carol, a woman who struggles with intense fear of abandonment,
Yeah.
unstable relationships, volatile emotions.
Right.
Her story really shows what it's like to live with like severely limited empathy.
It really does. And what's striking about Carol is how her low empathy creates this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, interesting.
She's desperate for connection.
Yeah, but her inability to understand and respond to other people's needs, especially her children's,
Right.
leads to all these conflicts and ends up pushing away the people she wants to be close to.
It's a heartbreaking cycle.
Yeah.
And it shows how empathy erosion doesn't just affect the person themselves.
Right.
It ripples outward, affecting everyone around them.
Exactly. Empathy is essential not just for us as individuals,
Right.
but for the health of our relationships and our communities.
Okay, so that brings us to the second type, the psychopath.
Yeah.
Now, I think when people hear psychopath, they think cold-blooded killer.
Right, like Hannibal Lecter.
Exactly. That's the Hollywood version,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Much more nuanced.
Okay.
While some psychopaths do commit violent crimes,
Yeah.
many others function pretty well in society.
Really?
It could be CEOs, lawyers, even surgeons.
Wow.
It's not really their actions that define them, but a certain set of core characteristics.
Okay, so what are we talking about here?
Well, Baron-Cohen points to a few key traits:
Okay.
superficial charm, lack of empathy and remorse, a tendency to be manipulative and deceitful,
Uh-oh.
and a disregard for social norms and the rights of others.
That's a pretty scary combination.
Yeah.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It can be.
But you said they can function successfully in society.
Yeah.
How is that possible with those kinds of traits?
That's what makes psychopaths so hard to spot.
Oh, okay.
They're really good at mimicking emotions and social cues, even if they don't actually feel them.
So they're like faking it.
Pretty much, they learn to say the right things and present themselves in a way that gains people's trust.
Like they're wearing a mask.
Exactly. A carefully constructed persona
Wow.
that hides their true nature.
And that lets them blend in.
Yeah, they can climb the corporate ladder, even charm their way into positions of power.
It's kind of terrifying.
But underneath that facade, there's this deep lack of empathy,
Yeah.
an inability to connect with others on an emotional level.
So it's not that they're totally incapable of understanding emotions. It's
Right.
more like they can recognize them in others, even manipulate them, but they don't actually feel them themselves.
Exactly. It's a key difference.
And does that mean it's a choice?
That's a good question.
Like, do they decide to be manipulative, or is
Yeah.
it just how they are?
It's a question researchers are still trying to figure out.
Yeah.
There's evidence that both nature and nurture play a role.
Okay.
Some might have a genetic predisposition,
Right.
while others might develop those traits because of early trauma or neglect.
So it's probably a combination of things.
It's likely complex, yeah.
It makes you realize that calling someone evil is way too simple.
It is.
There's a whole spectrum of behavior.
Right.
And understanding psychopathy is key to navigating that complexity.
Absolutely. It's about understanding, not just judging.
Yeah.
It doesn't excuse bad behavior,
Right.
but it gives its important context.
Okay, so we've covered borderline and psychopath. What about the narcissist?
Okay, so narcissists, like psychopaths,
Yeah.
share that lack of empathy.
Yeah.
They have this huge sense of self-importance,
Right.
a constant need for admiration,
Hmm.
and a belief that they're better than everyone else.
That sounds exhausting.
It can be.
Imagine needing to be the center of attention all the time.
It's draining for the people around them
Yeah.
because they can't see things from other people's perspectives.
Right?
They just bulldoze over anyone who gets in their way.
Oh.
They exploit others to feed their own ego,
Hmm.
and they can't feel real remorse for the harm they cause.
But don't we all have a little narcissism in us?
Sure.
I mean, we like to be liked and appreciated.
Of course.
We all have those moments of being self-centered.
Yeah, where's the line between healthy self-esteem and full-blown narcissism?
Right.
It's about the degree and the impact.
Okay.
For narcissists, that sense of self-importance isn't just a sometimes thing.
Yeah.
It's a constant pattern of behavior.
Right.
It affects their relationships and their whole lives. They have this distorted view of reality,
Okay.
where their needs always come first.
So it's not just about being vain or self-absorbed.
Oh,
It's about not being able to connect with others emotionally.
right.
To truly care about their experiences.
Exactly. And that lack of empathy can show up in a lot of different ways,
Okay.
from subtle manipulation and emotional abuse
Yeah.
to outright cruelty and aggression.
We talked about the empathy circuit in the brain.
Yeah.
What's going on in the brains of narcissists?
Good question.
Is their empathy circuit just totally fried?
The research on this is still developing,
Okay.
but Baron-Cohen thinks that narcissists might have an overactive reward system.
Mm.
They're constantly looking for validation and praise.
To boost their ego.
Exactly.
So it's like an addiction.
It's a good way to think about it.
They're hooked on feeling good about themselves, even if it hurts others.
And that addiction drives them to seek attention and admiration,
Yeah.
even if it means manipulating or exploiting people.
This is all fascinating.
But also kind of scary.
It is.
It really makes you see how someone's lack of empathy can cause so much harm,
Absolutely.
whether it's personally or on a societal level.
That's why it's so important to understand these zero-negative types.
Yeah.
It helps us recognize the warning signs,
Right.
protect ourselves from being used,
Mhm.
and maybe even find ways to help these individuals develop better coping skills.
You know, talking about these extreme cases
Yeah.
makes me wonder about the other end of the spectrum.
Right.
What about those people with super high empathy?
Yeah.
What's that like?
Good question.
And are there downsides to having too much empathy?
That's something to think about.
Phew. It's been heavy, hasn't it?
Yeah.
The whole exploration of 0 degrees of empathy.
It really has.
We've talked about borderline personality disorder,
Yeah.
psychopaths, narcissists,
Right.
all these examples of how a lack of empathy can just really mess things up
Yeah.
in people's lives and in society as a whole.
That's true.
It's almost enough to make you wonder if humanity is doomed. Yeah, I can understand feeling that way
Yeah.
after going through all that darkness.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's important to remember
Yeah.
that these 0 negative types only make up a tiny part of the population.
Yeah.
Most of us, like we said,
Yeah.
fall somewhere in the middle of that empathy spectrum.
Right.
And thankfully,
Yeah.
there are those who are at the high end.
Okay.
You know, the ones we could call empathy superheroes.
Okay, that's what I needed to hear.
Right.
So let's talk about those people.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean to have high empathy?
Well, Baron-Cohen says that high empathy individuals are incredibly sensitive to the emotional states of others.
Okay.
They pick up on cues that most people miss.
Hmm.
It's like they have this extra sense that lets them not just see, but feel the emotions of people around them.
Yeah, I've definitely known people like that
Yeah.
who just seem to have this natural ability to connect with you on like a deep level.
Exactly.
They're the ones who always know when you're down, even if you try to hide it.
Exactly. And it's more than just sensing emotions.
Yeah.
They also have this huge capacity for compassion and understanding.
Right.
They can actually put themselves in someone else's shoes,
Yeah.
see the world through their eyes,
Hmm.
and respond with kindness and care.
It really does sound like a superpower
It does.
to be able to experience the world with that kind of emotional depth and connection.
It has its advantages, for sure.
Yeah.
High empathy individuals usually have really strong, fulfilling relationships.
Okay.
They're often drawn to careers where they help others,
Yeah.
like teachers, therapists,
Right.
social workers,
Right.
jobs where they can have a positive impact.
They're the healers of the world.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
it's important to point out
Yeah.
that even high empathy has its downsides.
Really?
Imagine feeling the pain of others as strongly as you feel your own.
Yeah.
In a world with so much suffering, that could be really overwhelming.
Yeah. I can see how that would be exhausting.
Yeah.
Carrying the weight of the world.
Exactly. High empathy individuals can experience burnout, compassion fatigue, even secondary trauma.
Wow.
They can absorb the emotions of the people they're trying to help,
Yeah.
and that can lead to exhaustion and feeling helpless.
That makes sense if you're constantly exposed to other people's pain.
Right.
It's got to take a toll on you.
And because they're so sensitive to the needs of others,
Yeah.
they might struggle to set boundaries.
Right.
They might overextend themselves, try to fix everyone's problems,
Yeah.
and end up feeling drained and resentful.
So even empathy in like extreme doses can be a bad thing.
It can be, yeah. It's like anything else.
Too much of a good thing.
Exactly. It's about balance.
Right.
Learning to manage those empathic responses,
Yeah.
setting boundaries and taking care of yourself
Yeah.
are really important for these high empathy people
Okay.
so they can stay well while still connecting with others.
So it comes back to that empathy spectrum again.
It does.
It's not about going to one extreme or the other. It's about finding that middle ground
That sweet spot.
where you can be aware of other people's emotions
Yeah.
without being overwhelmed by them.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the question,
Uh-huh.
is empathy something you're born with?
Right.
Or can you actually learn to be more empathetic?
That's a great question.
Like, is it fixed?
Thankfully, research says that empathy isn't fixed.
Okay.
Our brains are incredibly adaptable,
Yeah.
and we can train ourselves to be more empathetic.
Okay, so how do we do that?
It's like working out a muscle.
Yeah.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Okay, I'm ready for my empathy workout routine.
Well, it's not about lifting weights.
Yeah.
It's about developing habits and practices
Okay.
that strengthen those empathy muscles.
Like what?
One of the best ways is to practice active listening.
Okay.
It's about really paying attention to what someone is saying,
Yeah.
not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Ooh, I'm guilty of that.
We all are. It's
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah.
But with effort, we can be more present, more tuned in to what others are saying,
Right.
both with their words and their body language.
Yeah.
It's about putting aside our own judgments
Hmm.
and trying to see things from their point of view.
So it's not just about hearing the words.
Right.
It's about understanding what's behind them.
Exactly.
The emotions and experiences that shape their perspective.
Yes. And another powerful practice is immersing yourself in stories,
Okay.
whether it's books, movies, or just listening to people share their experiences.
Great.
When we connect with stories,
Yeah.
we step outside our own limited view
Mm.
and enter into the lives of others.
It's like empathy training.
It is. We get to practice seeing the world through different eyes,
Yeah.
feeling different emotions,
Right.
expanding our understanding.
And then there's mindfulness meditation,
Yes.
which I've heard can have a big impact on empathy.
It can.
I'll be honest, I've always been skeptical.
Yeah.
How does sitting and focusing on your breath make you more empathetic?
It's not magic, but it does have a powerful effect on our brains.
Hmm.
Mindfulness is about being aware of the present moment,
Okay.
both within ourselves
Yeah.
and in the world around us.
Right. Yeah.
Helps us become more aware of our own emotions
Okay.
without getting carried away by them.
Mm.
And that self-awareness
Yeah.
helps us better understand and respond to the emotions of others.
So it's not about suppressing our emotions.
Yeah.
It's about being more aware of them,
Yes.
more accepting of them,
Exactly.
and less reactive to them.
Precisely. And
Yeah.
the more we do these things,
Yeah.
the act of listening, the immersing ourselves in stories,
Yeah.
the practicing mindfulness,
Yeah.
the stronger our empathy muscles become.
This has been such an eye-opening journey
It has.
from exploring human cruelty
Yeah.
to discovering the potential we all have for empathy.
It's amazing.
It's making me realize that empathy isn't just a nice thing to have.
Right.
It's absolutely crucial for a healthy society.
I completely agree. Empathy is the foundation for compassion, cooperation, ethical decisions.
Right.
It lets us see beyond our own self-interest
Mm.
and consider the well-being of others.
It's the opposite of that us versus them thinking
Exactly.
that we see so much these days.
It's everywhere.
Empathy lets us bridge those divides,
Yeah.
find common ground,
Right.
and build a more compassionate world.
A world worth striving for.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So to our listeners, I encourage you to think about where you are on that empathy spectrum.
Yeah.
How can you nurture and strengthen your own empathy circuits?
It's a great question.
What small acts of kindness can you bring into your life?
That's a good one.
Remember, empathy isn't a weakness.
Uh,
It's a superpower.
It really is.
And it's a superpower we can all develop.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into empathy.
It's been great.
We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of the human mind.